The history of Luxembourg is the history of a small region that has undergone frequent political changes. Its documented origins date back to Roman times, but the modern Luxembourg state is usually dated to 963. Welcome to this new video in our series on the history of European countries, where today we delve into the history of Luxembourg. The Luxembourg dynasty emerged as an influential European power, but its fall ended the country's independence. After periods of Burgundian rule, Luxembourg came under the Habsburgs in 1477, then became part of the southern Netherlands following the 80 Years' War. In 1713, it fell under the Austrian branch of the Habsburgs. In 1815, the Treaty of Paris transformed it into a Grand Duchy linked to the Netherlands, and the country underwent several territorial divisions that reduced its size, most notably in 1839. Luxembourg's independence was finally confirmed after the 1867 crisis, and German influence there strengthened in the late 19th century. It was occupied by Germany during both World Wars. Since 1945, Luxembourg has transformed into one of the world's wealthiest nations, thanks to political stability, a thriving financial services sector, and European integration. Early historical evidence in the area, now known as the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, points to a primitive civilization. Its history dates back to the Paleolithic period, more than 35,000 years ago. However, the first real evidence of a settled civilization dates to the Neolithic period, or the 5th millennium BC, when traces of settlements were discovered in southern Luxembourg. In Luxembourg, specifically in Welle-la-Tour, dwellings were built using a combination of logs as the basic structure, with walls and roofs made of bamboo covered with mud. While evidence of settlements in Luxembourg at the beginning of the Bronze Age is limited, several sites dating from the 13th to the 8th centuries BC have yielded artifacts such as pottery, knives and jewellery. These places include Nosvelt, Dolum, Mombok and Remarcium. The Celts inhabited what is now Luxembourg during the Iron Age. The Gallicans also inhabited what is now Luxembourg. During the Latin period and later, Luxembourg was known as Trivier. Trivier reached its peak in the 1st century BC, establishing numerous Iron Age fortified settlements near the Moselle Valley, in what is now southern Luxembourg, western Germany and eastern France. Most of the archaeological evidence from this period has been discovered in cemeteries, many of which are closely associated with the 50-hectare archaeological site of Tiedeberg, which reveals much about the dwellings and crafts of the time. The Romans, under Julius Caesar, completed their conquest and occupation of the region in 53 BC. The first known mention of the territory of present-day Luxembourg appears in Julius Caesar's commentaries on the Gallican War. The Trivier people were more cooperative with the Romans than most Gallic tribes and adapted easily to Roman civilization. Two revolts in the 1st century AD did not permanently damage their friendly relations with Rome. Trivier territory was originally part of Celtic Gaul, but with Domitian's reforms around 90 AD, it was reincorporated into Belgian Gaul. The Germanic Franks infiltrated Belgian Gaul as early as the 4th century. The Romans abandoned the region in 406 AD. By the 5th century AD, the territory of what would later be known as Luxembourg, and subsequently part of the core territory of the Carolingian Empire, had become part of the region. Under the Treaty of Verdun, it became part of Middle France, and in 855 it became part of Lotharingia. With the partition of Lotharingia in 959, it became part of the Duchy of Upper Lorraine within the Holy Roman Empire. The history of Luxembourg. Its true history began with the construction of Luxembourg Castle in the High Middle Ages. In 963, Siegfried the Fersen, Count of Baden, sold some of his ancestral lands to the monks of the Abbey of St. Maximinus in Trier in exchange for an ancient Roman fort, presumably called Los Lindbergh, which usually translates as Little Castle. Modern historians link the origin of the word to lexa, meaning fortification, which may have referred either to the remains of a Roman watchtower or to a primitive early medieval shelter. The Duchy of Luxembourg bore many names from the early Middle Ages through the Renaissance, according to the author, including Lucy Lindbergh, Lutzburg, Lochberg and Lichsberg. The Luxembourg dynasty produced numerous Holy Roman emperors, Bohemian kings and archbishops of Trier and Mainz. Around Luxembourg Castle, a city gradually grew into the centre of a small state of strategic importance to France, Germany and the Netherlands. Built on a rocky outcrop known as Bach, Luxembourg Castle underwent continuous expansion and fortification over the centuries by its successive owners, including the Bourbons, Habsburgs and Hohenzollerns, who made it one of the strongest castles on the European continent. Thanks to its formidable defences and strategic location, Luxembourg Castle was known as the Gibraltar of the North. The electors of Brandenburg, who later became kings of Prussia, ruled in the 17th and 18th centuries. They sought to claim the Luxembourg inheritance as the common heirs of William of Varangius and his wife Anna of Bohemia, the disputed dukes of Luxembourg in the 1460s. Anna was the eldest daughter of the last Luxembourg heiress. From 1609 they controlled a territorial base in the vicinity of the Duchy of Cleves, which later became a launching pad for Prussian expansion into the Rhineland. This Brandenburg claim eventually bore fruit when parts of Luxembourg were united with Prussia in 1813. The first Hohen to formally claim the throne, descended from Anna and her younger sister Elizabeth, was John George, Elector of Brandenburg. His maternal grandmother was Barbara J. Ellen. In the late 18th century, a smaller branch of the House of Orange-Nassau was also associated with them. In 1598, Philip II of Spain, then ruler of Luxembourg, bequeathed the remainder of the Low Countries to his daughter, Princess Isabella Clara Eugenia, and her husband Albert VII, Archduke of Austria. Albert was an heir and descendant of Elizabeth of Austria. Elizabeth was Queen of Poland and the younger granddaughter of Sigismund, Holy Roman Emperor. Thus, Luxembourg reverted to the heirs of the ancient Luxembourg dynasty, the descendants of Elizabeth. The Low Countries were an independent political entity during the couple's reign. After Albert's death without an heir in 1621, Luxembourg passed to his nephew and heir, Philip IV of Spain. The French invasion, Louis XIV of France invaded Luxembourg in 1684, an act that alarmed France's neighbours and led to the formation of the League of Augsburg in 1686. In the subsequent War of the Grand Alliance, France was forced to cede the duchy, which was returned to the Habsburgs by the Treaty of Ryswick in 1697. During this period of French rule, the renowned siege engineer Vauban reinforced the fortress's defences. Louis, grandson of the King of France, was the first apparent heir to the throne of Albert VII since 1712. Albert VII was a descendant of Anne of Bohemia and William of Thuringia, a lineage he inherited through his Danish great-grandmother on his mother's side. However, he was not the only heir to this branch. Louis was the first legitimate heir to the throne of Luxembourg from the line of the two sisters, daughters of Elizabeth of Bohemia, the last Empress of Luxembourg. Habsburg rule was confirmed in 1715 by the Treaty of Utrecht, and Luxembourg was incorporated into the Southern Federation. The Dutch Emperor Joseph and his successor, Emperor Charles VI, were descendants of the kings of Spain, heirs of Albert VII. Joseph and Charles VI were also descendants of Anne of Bohemia and William of Thuringia, inheriting this lineage through their mother. Although Anne and Elizabeth were not heirs to either dynasty, Charles was the first ruler of Luxembourg descended from Elizabeth's two Bohemian daughters. The Austrian rulers were willing to exchange Luxembourg for other territories in the Low Countries to expand their influence, which was geographically concentrated around Vienna. Thus, a Bavarian candidate emerged to seize the Duchy of Luxembourg. But this plan did not yield lasting results. However, Emperor Joseph II made a preliminary agreement to install his Luxembourgish neighbour, Charles Tudor, Elector of the Palatine, as Duke of Luxembourg and King of the Low Countries in exchange for his possessions in Bavaria and Franconia. This plan was thwarted by Prussian opposition. Charles Tudor, who became Duke of Luxembourg, was a minor descendant of both Anne and Elizabeth, but not the primary legitimate heir to either. During the War of the First Coalition, Germany invaded and annexed Luxembourg. Revolutionary France became part of the province of Fory in 1795. The annexation was formalized at Campo Formio in 1797. In 1798, Luxembourg's peasants began a revolt against the French, but it was quickly suppressed. This brief uprising is known as the Peasants' War. As independence progressed, Luxembourg remained largely under French rule until Napoleon's defeat in 1815. When the French left, the Allies appointed a provisional administration. Luxembourg was initially placed under the administration of the Government-General in Middelheim in mid-1814, and then from June 1814 under the administration of the Government-General. Middelheim was coveted by the Allies. The Congress of Vienna in 1815 had granted Luxembourg formal self-government in 1813. The Prussians had already managed to seize territory from Luxembourg to strengthen their vassal duchy of Jülich. The Bourbons of France had a strong claim to Luxembourg, while Emperor Francis of Austria controlled the duchy until it was annexed by revolutionary forces to the French Republic. However, his Chancellor, von Metternich, was not keen on reclaiming Luxembourg and the Low Countries due to their distance from the Austrian mainland. Prussia and the Netherlands, which also had claims to Luxembourg, made an exchange agreement. Prussia received the Principality of Orange, Nassau, the original Principality of the Prince of Orange in central Germany, and the Prince of Orange, in turn, received Luxembourg. Luxembourg's territory shrank somewhat, but it expanded in another way. It was elevated to the status of a Grand Duchy and placed under the rule of William I of the Netherlands. This was the first time in the Middle Ages that a duchy was ruled by a king who did not have a legitimate claim to the kingdom. Nevertheless, Luxembourg's military value to Prussia prevented it from becoming fully part of the Dutch kingdom. The fortress served as the headquarters of the Prussian forces. After Napoleon's defeat, Prussian troops were stationed in Luxembourg during the Middle Ages, and Luxembourg joined the German Confederation with Prussia. Luxembourg was responsible for its own defences and was also a Dutch protectorate. But by treaty, it became a Prussian garrison, occupied by 5,000 soldiers under the Prince of Hesse. The civil government was Dutch, and the Dutch levied taxes. A large part of Luxembourg's population joined the Belgian Revolution against Dutch rule. With the exception of the castle immediately adjacent to it, Luxembourg was a province of the newly formed Belgian state from 1830 to 1839. Under the Treaty of London of 1839, the Grand Duchy became fully sovereign and entered into a personal union with the King of the Netherlands. In return, the western part of the duchy, the larger and oil-richest, was ceded to Belgium as a vassal province of Luxembourg. This loss made the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg a predominantly German state, although French cultural influence remained strong. The loss of Belgian markets also caused significant economic hardship to the country. Recognizing this, the Grand Duke annexed Luxembourg to the German Confederation in 1842. However, as a result, Luxembourg remained a backward agrarian country for most of the century. Between 1841 and 1891, approximately one-fifth of Luxembourg's population emigrated to the United States. The 1867 crisis. In 1867, Luxembourg gained its independence after a turbulent period marked by brief civil unrest against plans to annex it to Belgium, Germany or France. Wilhelm III, King of the Netherlands and Lord of Luxembourg, was willing to sell the Grand Duchy to French Emperor Napoleon III in exchange for retaining Limburg, but he backed down when Prussian Chancellor Otto von Bismarck objected. The escalating tensions led to a conference in London from March to May. In 1867, the Second Treaty of London, brokered by Britain, ended the Luxembourg Crisis, guaranteeing the country's permanent independence and neutrality, along with the dismantling of its fortifications and the withdrawal of the Prussian garrison. During the 18th and 19th centuries, Luxembourg attracted prominent cultural figures such as Goethe, Victor Hugo, Émile Zola, Franz Liszt and William Turner. Until 1890, Luxembourg remained in a personal union with the Dutch crown. After the death of King William III, due to the rules of succession, the Luxembourg throne passed to Adolphe of Nassau, while his daughter Wilhelmina ascended the Dutch throne, thus beginning the independent Luxembourg dynasty. During World War I, 1914-1918, Luxembourg adopted a policy of ambiguous neutrality despite the German occupation, which fueled social tensions and led to the formation of the first trade union. After the war, the country faced internal and external debate regarding its form of government, but the monarchy continued with Queen Charlotte's accession in 1921. Luxembourg entered into an economic and monetary union with Belgium, while Germany remained a significant economic partner. The interwar period saw the expansion of universal suffrage, the rise of monarchist parties, and a growing influence of the Church. Luxembourg joined the League of Nations in 1920 to strengthen its international standing. Economically, agriculture declined in favor of industry, and conditions deteriorated in the 1930s, marked by political tensions and the influence of diverse European ideologies. Attempts to ban communists failed after the 1937 law was rejected in a referendum. With the outbreak of World War II, Luxembourg declared its neutrality in September 1939, but Germany invaded the country on May 10, 1940, overthrowing the government and the monarchy with limited resistance. The Luxembourg police resisted the German invasion in May 1940, but to no avail. The capital fell before noon with dozens of casualties. The royal family was forced to flee, travelling through Portugal to the United States, while the country remained under German occupation. In 1942, the Third Reich formally annexed Luxembourg, and its inhabitants were considered German citizens, subjecting them to conscription. Approximately 13,000 Luxembourgers were drafted, and thousands more were killed serving in the German army. The population resisted the occupation with peaceful means, primarily by maintaining their Luxembourgish language and rejecting forced assimilation policies. This led to brutal repression, including executions, deportations and forced labour, particularly after the general strike of September 1942, one of the most significant acts of collective resistance in Western Europe. American forces liberated most of the country in September 1944, but the Germans briefly recaptured the north during the Ardennes offensive before being finally driven out in January 1945. The capital was later bombarded with V-3 guns, resulting in numerous casualties. Overall, Luxembourg suffered heavy losses relative to its pre-war population. Following World War II, Luxembourg abandoned its policy of neutrality, becoming a founding member of the United Nations and NATO. It participated in the European integration project through the Treaty of Rome and entered into an economic and monetary union with Belgium and the Netherlands, the Benelux Union. Its economy underwent profound transformations, particularly with the decline of the mining sector in the 1970s. This led the country to adopt a new economic model based on diversification and social stability, which contributed to consolidating its position as a small but economically powerful and Europeanly integrated nation. Luxembourg has also succeeded in establishing a model of social peace through cooperation between the government and labour unions, thus avoiding major unrest. At the beginning of the 21st century, it became one of the world's leading countries in terms of GDP per capita, primarily supported by its financial sector, which emerged in the late 1960s but remained vulnerable to risks with attempts to harmonise European tax systems. Politically, Luxembourg has been a strong advocate of European integration. It was a founding member of the European Coal and Steel Community, 1952, and the European Economic Community, 1957, joined the Eurozone in 1999, and joined NATO early on in 1949. Despite its small size, it has played a mediating role between major powers, particularly between France and Germany, and has hosted important European institutions such as the European Court of Justice. Linguistically, it adopted a trilingual system, Luxembourgish, German and French, and recognized Luxembourgish as an official language in 1985. That same year, the country experienced a series of mysterious bombings targeting its infrastructure. Politically, Luxembourgish figures have risen to prominence on the European stage, most notably Jacques Santer and then Jean-Claude Juncker, who later became President of the European Commission in 2014. Domestically, successive governments came and went until Juncker's resignation in 2013, when Xavier Bettel led a liberal socialist green coalition and remained in power after the 2018 elections. Today, Luxembourg is a politically stable country with European influence that far exceeds its geographical size and a strong economy reliant on financial services and European integration. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.